In accordance with the resolution of the House, business is interrupted for the presentation of an inaugural speech by the member for Balmain. I call the member for Balmain.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional owners of the land on which this Parliament sits, and I pay my respects to the Elders past, present and future. I also acknowledge the history of dispossession of this country's Indigenous people. I express my sorrow for that history, and I resolve to do all that I can to overcome the ongoing consequences of that dispossession. I'm immensely proud and honoured to have been granted the great privilege of representing the people of Balmain. I stand here today as the first Greens member of this House. I join 5 Upper House Green MPs as the largest representation that our party has had in the history of this Parliament. The 2011 state election was our most successful election ever, with a record number of Green votes not only in the seat of Balmain, but also in both houses of Parliament. I acknowledge and celebrate the work of the members who came before me, as well as the activists, supporters and representatives who work to realise the Greens agenda both in Australia and around the world. The New South Wales Legislative Assembly first met in this place over 150 years ago, and I acknowledge all of those successful candidates who join me here today. I respect the tradition of this institution and the democratic principle that it represents, but I also recognise its limitations. Rarely in its history has Parliament led progressive social change. Most often the Parliament has followed, often reluctantly, the will of the people. And while Parliament has great powers, I recognise that it's our local communities where genuine political leadership occurs. Local leadership has protected people from many poor decisions made by parliaments. The history of property development in this state is just one example of an area where poor decisions have been resisted by strong and determined community leadership. It is from that history that the Greens and I arrive in this place. The Greens are not just about challenging, we are also about creating. The Greens offer an alternative vision for how our society can progress, based on our 4 key principles of environmental sustainability, peace and non-violence, grassroots democracy, economic and social justice. It is these 4 principles that guide the Greens' action, from how we vote in Parliament to how we campaign in our own communities. They acknowledge that we live in an interconnected world where social inequality, denial of human rights and environmental degradation are not separate problems, but are the same problem manifested in different ways. These principles also acknowledge that we rely on each other, that diversity and respect strengthens and protects us all, and we share a planet upon which we all rely, which nurtures and provides for us, and which we, in return, must protect. These 4 principles have guided me throughout my political life, and it's against these principles that I will test legislation in this House. They set out our values, but also the vision that I see for my community and the state of New South Wales. As a Member of Parliament, I now have the opportunity to apply these principles to work with the government in order to meet the challenges facing our state. I would not be here without the support of many people. I thank my family, my greatest supporters, for their love and faith in me. My mother Pamela, my father Richard, my sisters Rebecca and Jacqueline, and my brother Jonathan. I'm delighted to have them here in the Parliament tonight. It was in another part of the world that my parents' migrant journey began. It was Australia where my parents sought a better future, free from the economic difficulties and class prejudice of England in the 1960s. They followed others in my family who searched for a better life, from my great-grandfather escaping anti-Semitism in Germany, to my auntie and uncle who now live and work in the United States. My family was a regular suburban family, not overtly political, but I can see now that politics was all around me. My father, he was a tradesman, a fitter, who worked in the combined spaces of a ship's engine room when he sailed into Sydney Harbour as a merchant sailor. My mother was the daughter of a proud dock worker in Liverpool, England. And after being bombed out 3 times during World War II, her family sought the relative security and opportunity of this great nation. Australia was a refuge from the class-ridden mother country, but it had its hardships. I remember vividly the stress in my family when my father was on strike, as each day rolled by with the uncertainty of no income, but the determination for a fair go for himself, his family, and his fellow workmates. From those times, I gained a real insight into power and the sacrifices that people made to achieve what we would see today as fair and decent outcomes. The development of these values also helped make clear to me the urgent need to address environmental exploitation, where powerful interests were not taking account of the environmental impacts, nor the needs of future generations. These ideas, which formed naturally in my life when I was growing up, were conformed and reinforced intellectually during my undergraduate and postgraduate studies, which were not coincidentally in the field of economics. It was these ideas from my family, from my studies, and from the Greens that led me to stand as a Greens candidate for election to Leichhardt Council. I was first elected to Leichhardt Council in 1999, and I'm proud to have served the community as mayor for almost 3 years. I'm proud that a Greens-led council has been able to deliver record investment in long-neglected basic infrastructure. We have new and expanded childcare facilities, an expanded library, more youth and senior services. We've continued the great tradition at Leichhardt Council of open council. We've abolished fees for freedom of information applications. We've introduced new ways to engage residents and tackled our carbon and environmental footprint. We've given unprecedented support to our chambers of commerce and our local precinct committees, and we have always stood up against poor government decisions in order to make our community an even better place to work and to live. At the same time, we've promoted initiatives and support for the socially and economically disadvantaged, the disabled, the mentally ill and refugees. We've also been able to do our bit to promote, through non-violent means, the defence of human rights in Australia and abroad. The seat of Balmain has beautiful bays, riverside parks and heritage buildings. It's a diverse and vibrant inner-city community with a rich and deep heritage. It has extensive evidence of long-term occupation by the Gadigal and Wangal people and their ancestors, as well as some of the earliest buildings of European settlement. The area has an Aboriginal history, a migrant history, a working class history, a history of activism and political engagement. It's changed markedly in recent years, and in particular in recent decades, and that change continues, but it holds on to its social and community values. There are now areas of significant wealth in the electorate of Balmain, but there are still areas of significant disadvantage. This community I represent expects good government and the delivery of quality services and infrastructure. It also expects socially and environmentally responsible activities, fair treatment for all of its citizens, and a decent society that looks after those in need. I am inspired, for example, that my community, led by the Friends of Callan Park, has fought so hard for so long to protect Callan Park, not just as a beautiful part of Sydney's natural and urban heritage, but as a home for mental health services for those who are most vulnerable in our community. During the last 20 years of my political activism, a great deal has been achieved, but the challenges of sustainability and inequality loom ever larger and are becoming increasingly urgent. Inequality in this country has increased dramatically, Our natural resources are being consumed at an unsustainable rate, and our country is involved in futile conflicts abroad. The wealth gap in Australia is growing. The wealthiest 20% of Australians own 60% of our collective wealth, while the poorest 20% of our nation own just 1%. At the coalface of social justice work, charities and NGOs have documented that the most vulnerable people have been hit hardest by rising costs in the key areas, in particular, of education, health and dental services. The influence of the economic rationalism agenda is now embedded in the Liberal, Labor and even National Party policy. Yet this idea that the market is superior to regulation and that private is always presumed to be better than public is undermining services and driving the growing wealth gap. This view has informed the privatisation and user pays agenda of both Labor and the coalition parties, allowing private profit-making to dominate a range of services that were once considered basic responsibility of government to its citizens. Privatisation has been a particularly pressing issue of concern for the people of New South Wales. More often, privatisation has delivered rising costs, diminishing services and reduced access for the disadvantaged. For we Greens, inequality matters not only for the people on the lowest incomes, but because the effects of inequality on the environment, on social cohesion, on health, social mobility and the future of a fair go in Australia. In short, we believe that a more equal society benefits everyone. The truth is that economic rationalism is a race to the bottom, and a more democratic economy would be a win for the vast majority of Australians. But to confront the challenges of inequality and those that face us, we must find the tools for change. I'm not convinced by the arguments that the dislocation caused by economic rationalist policies. Acting Speaker, can I ask for an extension of time, please?
The question is that the extension of time be granted. All that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Continue.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. I'm not convinced by the arguments that the dislocation caused by economic rationalist policies will only be short-term and eventually there will be a longer-term gain. In fact, it is clear that inequality driven by this agenda has a corrosive effect on a collaborative society, encouraging excessive consumption, degrading trust and cooperation, exacerbating physical and mental ill health, as well as fuelling a range of social problems. But addressing inequality requires more than changing the revenue allocations of a government, as important as that process may be. There's been a lot of discussion in this House recently about the federal budget. But what hasn't been pointed out is this country still spends more on the military and defence than it does on education. That it spends many times more subsidising the fossil fuel industry than it does investing in renewable energy. And inequality is not just about the divide between those who work and those who don't work, but also how it affects people who work hard but are denied economic security. Casualisation in TAFE is a case in point. Casuals have become the norm rather than the exception in this critical area of training for the next generation. Investment in public transport, health and education are critical in addressing inequality, but so are efforts to promote employment, innovation, small business, cooperatives and community-based solutions, solutions that come from the grassroots of each of our communities. No government in this country, state or federal, has presented a solution to wasteful production and excessive consumption, which lies at the heart of our environmental challenge. In New South Wales, we even struggle to implement container deposit legislation, which, when such schemes have been enforced in Europe for over 20 years. And instead of investing in mass clean energy, we often only hear of the need for individuals to reduce their footprint, while governments agree to new coal-fired power stations and slap 110,000 households in the face, breaking its contract with people who invested in solar. Australia is uniquely placed in confronting the great environmental issues of our time. Per head of population, we use more fossil fuels. We emit more greenhouse gases. We have cleared more forests, and we have seen the extinction of more species than almost any other nation on Earth. Despite this, our country remains a place of great beauty and incredible potential. From its ancient hostile interior to its coastal rainforests and wilderness, marked still by a truly unique array of plants and animals. Our continent is home to enormous reserves of fossil fuels, which we avidly overexploit. But we also have the natural assets that can deliver enormous amounts of clean, renewable energy that do not require us to destroy our farmlands and wilderness areas, pollute our atmosphere, or destroy the habitat of our unique flora and fauna. I have no doubt that in this decade we must and we will confront the environmental issues that are threatening our planet. I hope that this Parliament will play its role in leading the country towards a more sustainable future. In search for this more equitable, just and environmentally sustainable future, it's not just parliamentarians that will lead us. It is the grassroots work of thoughtful, passionate people in our community that will lead the way. I would like to conclude by acknowledging some of these people and thanking many of the people in my life who have supported and encouraged me over the years. It's impossible to name everyone who has played an important role in me being here tonight, nor going into the detail of the support they had given, but I wanted to note a few special people. First, to Emily Christian, who joins us here tonight in the gallery. Thank you for believing in me, for your unrelenting support during the campaign. Your empathy and understanding means so much to me. Thank you to Hall Greenland for his solidarity during my first term on council. My close friends, Koma Montan, a Burmese refugee now living in Australia, and Kotan Dok, who lives on the Thai-Burma border, both of whom are an inspiration in their struggle for freedom and democracy for the people of Burma. To my fellow Greens councillors on Leichhardt Council since 2004, Michelle McKenzie, Rochelle Porteous, Kate Hamilton, Alan Sinnis, Cassie Plata, Daniel Kogoy. To Emma Nicholson for her fine intellect, constant encouragement and positivity. Saskia Brown for her constant help over many campaigns. The tenacious Chris and Kathy Harris, and all the members of the Greens campaign for Balmain, many of whom I'm proud to say have taken the time to come here this evening. The Greens state campaign team and their media office. To, of course, my fellow Greens MPs, the former and current conveners of the Port Jackson Greens, Chris Holly and Craig Channels, and importantly, all of the members of my local group. In particular, I'd like to thank all of the volunteers who worked so hard in the seat of Balmain. I say thank you. It is because of you that I am here this evening, and I commit myself to deliver the representation that you have worked so hard for and that all of you deserve. And finally, to the voters of Balmain, my heartfelt gratitude for this honour. I can assure you that I will never take your trust and support for granted, that I will always try my best to represent your values and priorities, and that I will work to ensure, regardless of your political allegiances, you will be proud of the efforts that I make for a more just, prosperous and sustainable society for the people of New South Wales.
Well said, buddy. Well done, mate. Cameron, next one. Very, very well done. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Mark, congratulations. So, Gabby, well done, mate. Good stuff.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Congratulations, Jan. Thank you. Well done, mate. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so, can I get your notes for hand signs? Yep. Yes, please. Fantastic.
No, wait there. I won't give you all the scrawly changes.
No worries. And so,
Thank you.
welcome to the bear pit.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Order. Are there any notices of motion, general notices of motion? If not, I